In all the opulent glamour of the Las Vegas Grand Prix circuit, the street circuit down the strip, Formula One cars on their Thursday night, a cold Thursday night, I thought looked pretty inelegant, partly because street circuits obviously take a long time to rubber in, to get some sort of groove, but also because on this sort of circuit, they just look a little bit ungainly when they're sliding all over the place. Anyway, that's what happened on Thursday. No grip whatsoever. It was all about getting tyre temperature. And no real surprise, as kind of predicted in the live stream, to see Mercedes going very well there. It was a scratchy session, and the Mercedes is a bit of an edgy car. And they were getting decent tyre temperatures too. No doubt about that. But I think the ominous sign for Mercedes, Ferrari and Red Bull is that McLaren not quite as effective as Mercedes when the track had zero grip in getting the tyres to work. Nonetheless, when the track did start to pick up a bit of grip in the second session, when they went out on fuel and on soft tyres, McLaren looked very, very strong. Lando Norris, again, absolutely fabulous around the street circuit. But let's not detract from the day of glory for Mercedes, because Lewis Hamilton, after a very disappointing for him Brazilian Grand Prix, where the car just got totally away from him in terms of what it was doing mid-corner, the back end was all over the place, he couldn't get the front to turn in either. George Russell in the other car doing a very nice job. Lewis bounced back in Vegas really, really good with no tyre temperatures, throwing the car around a little bit, getting the tyres to work, and very, very good on both the medium tyre, which of course they used while the track was rubbering in the soft tyre at the end of FP1, and then also in FP2 when he was quick on the soft tyre on light fuel, and was the only runner to stay on the soft with fuel in the car as well, and got a pretty good run out of him. A nice choice there, I think, by Mercedes to go for the soft on Lewis and the medium on George with fuel in the car, because the track is picking up grip, things are changing all the time. You want to get as much data as you can to see how the soft is going to settle in to fuel loads and race conditions. So some good work there by Mercedes today. All round the team looked very good, no organisational dramas on this occasion, and Lewis doing a lot for his own self-confidence as well, looking really good in the car. But it was Lando Norris right there doing a time too, almost unexpectedly, given that McLaren were a little bit low-key on the medium tyre, but on the soft tyre, really, really good by Lando Norris. Oscar Piastri, again, not quite as effective as Lando, and there was one moment when Oscar caught the wall on entry, on a very wide entry to a chicane, left-right chicane, which is unusual for Oscar because he does turn in a little bit earlier than Lando, but a bit of a messy mistake from Oscar Piastri there on the soft tyre, but he looked very good on the fuel runs. We'll get onto that in a minute. So Lewis Hamilton quickest, Lando Norris second, George Russell very good in the other car, 34.0, did a really good run on the medium tyre with full tanks. And then the Ferraris, which were bound to go well around Vegas, it is their sort of circuit. Again, lots of lock-ups, lots of straight on at turn 14 at the end of the long straight. They seem to take forever in the braking area to get into 14. Virtually everybody had some sort of lock-up or moment. There's lots of room there. You can do your donut, get back into the rhythm without too much drama, but particularly in FP1, but also in FP2, lots and lots of lockups and dramas there, and particularly with both Ferraris. But Carlos Sainz, in the end, slightly fewer mistakes than Charles Leclerc. Doesn't mean a lot on a Friday. Charles does make a lot of mistakes on Fridays typically. But Carlos Sainz looking good in the Ferrari as well, just a little bit quicker than Charles Leclerc. And Pierre Gasly, who's been looking very good recently, super quick in the Alpine, relatively speaking, super quick, very quick in the straight line. We'll get onto that in a minute as well. Kevin Magnussen and Nico Hülkenberg in the two Haas Ferraris looking good. But look where Max Verstappen and Sergio Perez are. Given that most of the other drivers are bracketed together in terms of their car performance, you got to say what a dreadful day for Red Bull. Having said that, Max didn't get in a proper lap on the soft tyre. The red came out when Alex Albon stopped with a fuel pressure problem in the Williams, just as Max was on his quickest lap. So don't read too much into that in terms of where he is right there in the listing, and obviously things are going to change for tomorrow. But generally speaking, Red Bull having a lot of trouble getting temperature into the tyres, getting the tyres into the window to get them operating. When they got some weight in the car, they put fuel in the car on the medium tyre, they were a lot more competitive. So let's have a look at those long runs then, of which I speak. Lewis Hamilton there again on the soft tyre, was a sensible run on the soft tyre as well, 38.6, not anything ridiculous. 38.6 again, repeating that, 38.9. And in terms of the Pirellis being obviously prone to deg in these cold conditions, that wasn't a bad run at all by Lewis on the soft tyre. Not as quick as it happened as George on the medium tyre, 38.1, very good run by George. did the most laps as well. As I said earlier, really good run. 38.9, 38.5, 38.1, 39.0. Look at that, 39.3, 38.8. Very good run. Lando Norris, only one quick lap, 38.8, 38.2, and then in traffic a lot, but obviously there or thereabouts. Oscar Piastri making up for that with a very good heavy fuel run. As I say, for McLaren, 37.3, which is actually the quickest of all the fuel run laps we saw today. Very good lap. But then 37.3 and then 38.2. Everything else in the 38.2. So a little bit of an abnormal lap by Oscar. Obviously, I presume they just said to him, push, 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 see what we can get out of this tyre. And then he had reasonable consistency, 38.2, 38.3, 38.6, 30, 39.4. So McLaren looking very good in terms of the red tyre, soft tyre lap, fast laps, and also with fuel in the car. Ferrari, as I say, gathering pace as the session wore on. Neither driver getting perfect laps in terms of traffic or indeed not having lockups. But Carlos Sainz, not bad at all, 38.8, 38.3, 38.7, 37.8. That's better than Max Verstappen, got to say. So Ferrari at the moment, as I say, doing a better job than Red Bull. No real surprise there. We did expect Ferrari to be going well. 38.3, Charles Leclerc, 37.9, not quite as quick as Carlos. Then in traffic, finished with a 38.6. So thereabouts. And then finally, Max Verstappen, 38.1, which puts him in the ballpark, sort of Lando Norris area. 38.3 for Sergio Perez. So yeah, not bad at all for both Red Bulls, picking up grip and balance as they get weight in the car with fuel. And that will change, as I said, tomorrow in terms of the track becoming far less green. And then finally, let's just have a look at the speed trap. Look at Pierre Gasly. I mean, that was probably a mega toe, but you'd say that. But then again, Esteban Ocon, 347. So the Alpine's set up with very little wing and carrying that with grip. So very impressive to see that for Alpine. McLaren, for a change, surprisingly quick in a straight line, 344. I mean, this is more the ballpark speed, isn't it, the front runners. So you could say quickest of the front runners, 344 for both McLarens. Normally you'd see them a bit slower than Mercedes or Ferrari, but there they are, right in the ballpark, or the Hard Rock Stadium, whichever way you want to look at it. Max Verstappen 344 as well. That augurs reasonably well for him tomorrow, because it means he's not running that much wing on a day when they had zero grip. So they didn't fall back into the trap of putting too much wing on the car, and that should be a reasonable setup for them tomorrow. And the same goes for Sergio Perez. Aston Martin's not slow in a straight line either, and Mercedes, surprisingly so. So another point about Mercedes and why they were one of the reasons they were quick today when the track was green, running for them quite a lot of downforce. And that'll presumably come out of the car, but then that may well change the balance going tomorrow. We've often seen Mercedes go quite well on a Friday and then kind of lose it going into the weekend. That could be a pointer to where they're going. I would imagine they're going to have to take downforce out of the car, and as I say, that will have an impact on balance. 340 for Lewis Hamilton and George Russell 339. And the other significant top speed there through the trap, Ferrari 338, even slower than Mercedes. Carlos Sainz only 336, so they're going to need to take wing out of the car as well. But I suspect that Ferrari, as ever, will have a slightly bigger operating sweet spot for their car as they do change the balance and as the track does pick up grip. Quite a lot of upgrades on the cars in Vegas, as you would expect after the break we've had since Brazil. This is the start of the final triple header of 2024, of course. Many of those changes to do with the lower downforce settings in Vegas, front wing, etc. like that, adjusting to what they might be doing with the rear. But also at Red Bull, we've got some new floor fences on the car, which Red Bull describe as by elevating the upper edge of the second inside to out forward floor fence, a small vortex can be shed to benefit the floor edge downstream. So I'm not sure Max Verstappen was feeling much benefit of that today with zero grip from the tyres, and I'm not sure that new floor fence had any impact on that. But nonetheless, that is what Red Bull have been doing. At Mercedes, they've just trimmed the trailing edge flap of the front wing, which is just to balance the car in terms of the downforce setting they're running in Vegas. But at Ferrari, quite a lot of changes. Similar front wing adjustments for Vegas specifically, but significant performance changes to the floor fences, the floor body, and the floor edge, which Ferrari describe as not event specific. This update features reworked front floor fences targeting an improvement of the losses travelling downstream. The front floor body volume has subsequently re-optimised together with the floor edge loading and vortex shedding into the diffuser. So sounds impressive. Let's see. Again, I don't think they could have got too much information from the condition of the track today, but as the track does pick up grip, let's see how Ferrari go tomorrow. Sounds good. Good result from the wind tunnel. Let's see if it actually happens in real life. Whereas at McLaren, just a new front wing flap, which is circuit specific to the downforce level in Vegas. So they are the major changes to the cars in Vegas. As I say, Friday, not a brilliant day in terms of how the Formula One cars looked, but there's no doubt at all the Vegas circuit overall doesn't massively penalise cars with relatively small faults, and it is going to be a very competitive grid, certainly at the front and also, of course, in the midfield. It's that sort of circuit. There's a lot of time on full throttle. Everybody's going to find the right sort of compromise between top speed and their own grip level and balance. And that's what will be reflected, I think, in qualifying. In the meantime, on tenterhooks in Japan, Terry Neville has had a massive engine problem in the Hyundai. Very, very bad luck for him. He was super quick in the first couple of stages. This is obviously the championship defining final round of the World Rally Championship. And his car just lost power. And because there was no service halt, they're not allowed to do any service on the cars. He had to do like 5 stages with effectively road power on the car and just dropped right out of contention in terms of the results going through to Saturday night. It's not all lost, of course, because the World Rally Championship, unlike Formula One, does allow you to regroup on the Sunday, and there's a different point scoring system on the Sunday. It's not all over though, but amazing after a season like that to just lose power after 3 stages in the Hyundai. And in the other car, his main rival, obviously Tanak, for the Drivers' Championship, having a trouble-free run right at the front of the field. So interesting to see how Terry recovers from that one. Anyway, that's rallying, and I'm sure in this picture that's exactly what Charles Leclerc and Carlos Sainz are talking about as we speak. Anyway, a big thanks to Jetcraft, to OEM Exclusive, and of course to Track Ninja. Thanks to you two for watching. See you tomorrow. A scratchy, edgy qualifying session at night, late on Saturday night for the Las Vegas Grand Prix, about what you'd expect on a circuit with lots of long straights, bumps, high-speed chicanes, and, of course, propensity for bouncing as well. Very difficult to get the tyres in the right operating temperature, as Aston Martin found out, didn't even get out of Q1. But at the front, of course, there was a pole position to be contested. It was very close. Ferrari looked as if they'd got it right at the end, but then George Russell, out on the track, last on track, with nobody in front of him, went out and took the pole for Mercedes. A superb George Russell lap. Unbelievably brave through the blind high-speed changes of direction. Very, very good into the tight chicanes. I mean, this circuit, if you have got the tyre temperatures right, is all about braking late from high speed and getting the power on well out of the slow speed corners. The medium speed corners, change of direction, medium speed corners to fast corners are all basically flat. It's all about just getting the tyres to work into and out of slow corners from very high speed. And Mercedes did that really well with George Russell. The big surprise was a double whammy surprise. It was that Lewis Hamilton was not right there with him because he'd been quickest in Q2. And the time he did in Q2, 32.5, would have made him P3 on the grid if he just repeated that time, but he couldn't get a lap out of the car in Q3. We'll get onto that in a second, but the other double whammy of that was that Pierre Gasly then took P3 for Alpine. Absolutely superb performance on the back of Brazil, with everybody saying, oh, well, they only got that result because they didn't stop and they were lucky to get the free pit stop under the red. Yeah, well, that car is going pretty well now, particularly in a straight line. Pierre Gasly, let's have a look at it. I've got to read it again because it is unbelievable. Pierre Gasly, 354 kilometers an hour through the speed trap on that lap that made him P3. But before we get too excited about that, look at Carlos Sainz. Did exactly the same time through the speed trap on his own as well. So the Ferrari, for the same downforce level, if you like, obviously they're different cars, definitely has a little bit more grip than the Alpine, which is about what you would expect. But 2 excellent laps from Pierre Gasly, P3, and Carlos Sainz, who made no mistakes and qualified second for Ferrari. I did say in the live stream that I thought Ferrari would go very well around Vegas, and so it proved. Charles Leclerc, again, made more mistakes than Carlos Sainz. And I think this brings into perspective, again, the decision by Ferrari to let Carlos Sainz go. I use the word sacking because it's nothing more, nothing less than that. And the interesting thing is that Carlos is getting better and better as a race driver and better as a qualifier now. Nothing to do with the pressure he's been under. It's just the time in the car and Carlos Sainz evolving as a racing driver. He's looking really, really good now. And yet Ferrari, for whatever reason, and we know the timescale, are getting rid of him in 2 races' time after Qatar and Abu Dhabi. Great shame for Carlos, but driving absolutely superbly. To out-qualify Charles Leclerc around here is a real achievement, and we must also see it to the backdrop of what Ferrari are doing. They're replacing him with Lewis Hamilton, who today in Q3 was absolutely nowhere. Now, I've been looking for detail as to where it went wrong for Lewis. Yeah, we saw him running wide, we saw a bit of oversteer. That was under the heading of tyre temperatures not being exactly where they should be. The only thing I can say is that whenever they released George Russell, he always came out second. And I guess this is another Mercedes thing. Oh, well, it's his turn to be out last on the track. Okay, take it in turns. Let's be good boys. George Russell always went out on a free track. And when he took the pole, he did so absolutely the last car on the circuit. The track was no doubt at its quickest at that point. Lewis Hamilton, on both his laps, was released right behind Nico Hülkenberg in the middle of the traffic, 5 cars ahead of George Russell, and he had a bit of a run with Carlos Sainz as well on his first run. That's no excuse. I mean, Lewis has been around for a long, long time now and knows how to get a lap time out of the car, but it wouldn't have helped in the context of how well George is driving and the free road that George Russell had. You'd imagine also there would have been a reasonable attempt to get some towing out of some of these teams, but they didn't. None of them did it in Q3. Although in Q1, it was very clear that Sergio Perez was able to help Max Verstappen to the tune of about 0.3 by being in exactly the right place before the braking area into turn 14. That really helped Max. And then Sergio had his lap on his own, couldn't get out of Q1. Very, very difficult weekend again for Sergio Perez. As for Max Verstappen, the car was much better. He had a lurid long run on the medium tyre earlier that day, and it led to a bit of a contretemps on the radio with Max saying, if you keep me out on these tyres for any longer, I'm for sure going to crash. And he had a couple of moments on them anyway. So they brought him into the garage, got the car set up, and then put him on a new set of softs. And immediately Max said, yeah, finally we got some tyre temperature, we got some grip. And that was the car he took into qualifying, and he did pretty well with it. His limiting factor was probably top speed. There's a lot of stuff going on the internet at the moment about how Red Bull forgot to bring the right wing to Vegas. Okay, maybe they forgot, maybe they made a mistake, whatever it was. 347 was Max Verstappen's top speed through the trap on his quickest lap. Yeah, a long way from Pierre Gasly and Carlos Sainz. But guess what? George Russell's top speed through the speed trap, 347. So I don't think there's anything there that you can say from Red Bull's perspective they made a mistake, they got it wrong with the rear wing, because they did have the top speed that Mercedes had to get the pole. End of story. Mercedes on this occasion just did a better job, maybe by luck or by judgment, of getting the tyre temperatures absolutely right. As for McLaren, slightly quicker in a straight line, 349, 347 for Lando Norris and Oscar Piastri. But 33.0, 1 minute 33.0 was the lap time for that car. That's what both drivers did in Q2, and it's what both drivers again did in Q3. Nothing more to be had out of the McLaren. So where are they losing time? It was interesting to see the tyre choices going into Q3. All the front runners obviously tried to run only one set of new soft tyres in Q2 in order to have 2 sets in Q3. But McLaren didn't do that, and they ran the first phase of Q3 on a used set. Now you'd say maybe that cost them time switching to the new tyre and the drivers adapting to the grip of the new tyre in the last phase. But guess what? Pierre Gasly also did the same in the Alpine. Started on a used set for his first run and was quick, and then was even quicker in the last phase of Q3 on the new tyres. So I don't think we can blame that. Also under that heading, it was interesting in Q2 how various teams approached that problem. Max Verstappen went out on a new set, did a time, and then just sat in the garage. A little bit of nail biting there because he dropped from something like P3, P4 down to P7 as the checkered flag came out, but he was okay, obviously got through into Q3. Whilst Ferrari kept their 2 drivers in the garage for as long as possible, whilst others were out on their new set of softs, and then ran their 1 set of new softs through to the end of the session. So different approaches. Not sure it all added up to anything. It just shows how difficult it was to get the tyres to work. And the difference between a new set and a scrub set was very questionable and debatable going into Q3. It looks like ultimately the way to do it was 2 new sets of tyres in Q3, providing you had a free lap and providing you were out right at the end when the track was at its quickest. Lewis Hamilton, as I say, in traffic on both occasions with Nico Hülkenberg and also with Carlos Sainz. And whilst there was no balking and whilst there was no impediment, it would have been something around him. There might have been a bit of turbulence. There might have been this, there might have been that. The mitigating circumstances, that's about all you can say. Nonetheless, 32.5 in Q2, even in traffic, he could have done a 32.7 and he would have been P4, P5 on the grid. So, yeah, difficult, strange times. I think Max Verstappen thinking if I had a bit more top speed, I would have been right there. But then again, he will look at the top speed of the Mercedes and say, yeah, we didn't get the tyres right. Even in this setup, we didn't get it quite right. Max had pretty good runs in Q3 and went quicker than he had in Q2. So it looks about right. The only thing you can say is how difficult the car obviously was for Sergio Perez. He just couldn't get the tyres into the window at all. So if you really want a barometer of where Red Bull are, you say, wow, what a difference between Perez and Max Verstappen yet again. The start of Q3 was delayed, allowing the temperatures to drop even more. Track temperature went down to about 13.3 degrees Celsius from 13.8, 14.0. And that was because Franco Colapinto went off big time in the Williams. A very embarrassing incident, really, because he'd done very well to get into Q2. Alex Albon hadn't got out of Q1. The car obviously wasn't brilliant, but like everybody else, struggling with tyre temperatures. But he lost it in a very, very inelegant way. Coming out of a change of direction, slow corner, got a little bit wide on acceleration out of the right-hand exit. And then there's a left-hand apex with concrete on the apex. And he just misjudged it. He ran wide and then just went straight into the apex left front off the car. Now, if you run wide and you take the rear off the car, I suppose that's one thing. But if you just misjudge an apex to that extent and to have a shunt that big, then that is, well, that's a bit of a warning sign. As I've said, he is, for all the song and dance has been about Franco Colapinto, and there's been a lot, and being a Carlos Reutemann guy, I was slightly confused by the comparisons with Carlos that came up in Brazil about Franco being the next Carlos Reutemann. I pointed out at the time that Carlos, from day one, was always a front-end, early turn-in driver and was beautiful to watch, even in 1972, his first season in Formula One in that respect. Whereas Franco has always been, to my eye, ever since he got into Formula One, a rear-end driver, driving on the rear, which is to say that he doesn't look for shorter entries, shorter corners, that he does go for wider, more open entries. And what we saw today was a classic example of how that can lead you into trouble, as indeed we saw in Brazil when he was catching white lines. There was another point too, which was that he was actually going very well on that lap and had a few purple segments, all because he was in quite a lot of traffic and getting toes here and there. And that suggests that maybe there's a lack of mental discipline in terms of the structure of the lap and therefore getting carried away when purples appear. It was a big shunt too, 50G they're saying in the Williams press statement, and obviously a lot of work again for the Williams mechanics after the carnage of Brazil, but more importantly they're just waiting to have, as I speak, waiting to have medical approval that Franco can race tomorrow, because it was quite a big impact to be going through him. But as I say, you know, it was a misjudgment of an apex by a driver who lives on oversteer and relies on the back end, and I'm surprised that Williams already haven't got him to work a little bit harder on using the front of the car a little bit better. And if they are planning to race him in 2026, he's got to stand down in 25 because the two drivers are Alex Albon and Carlos Sainz. Then, in my opinion, they should book a lot of time with Rob Wilson now to get Franco's feel for the front end sorted, because he's got phenomenal feel and touch. There's no doubt about that. It's just that he's doing it on the rear of the car rather than the front. And I'd book, one day a week for 52 lessons, I think, probably. 52 sessions should be called, not lessons, that's probably not the right word. 52 sessions would do very well for Franco, and he'd be well placed then to do the job in 2026, in my opinion. Other notables, the difference between Pierre Gasly and Esteban Ocon. Astounding difference, really. And Pierre Gasly just getting better all the time. On a recent live stream, I was asked about, I think it was the 5 fastest qualifiers in Formula One, and I did include Pierre Gasly in that. That was a couple of weeks ago. And I truly believe that. I think he really is quick, and that showed today. He's truly become a class driver. and the team is going in the right direction. He'll be really good next year in that car with the Mercedes power unit as well. And also, we shouldn't forget Nico Hülkenberg and the role he played in qualifying. Not saying he held up Lewis, but he was always there. But yet again, how well Haas Ferrari are going. Really good job by Haas Ferrari. And Yuki Tsunoda, again, very strong in the V-Carb Honda. Liam Lawson not getting out of Q2. As I say, there was the Colapinto yellow right at the end. But Yuki Tsunoda very strong throughout qualifying and will start P7, another excellent result for him. Meanwhile, in Japan, speaking of Yuki, just for an update, everything's solved on the wastegate turbo issue on the Terry Neuville Hyundai. He's worked his way back into 7th place overall. His teammate Ott Tanak, the driver that can still beat Terry to the Drivers' Championship, leading the rally easily now. So looking good for Hyundai in terms of the Manufacturers' Championship against Toyota, but all to play for now going into Super Sunday in Japan. That should be worth watching as well. All these championships up in the balance. From Max Verstappen, just to finish on that note, from Max Verstappen's point of view, thinking about the championship, probably not doing that at all, knowing Max, but nonetheless, if he did think about the championship, he'd think, well, at least I'm ahead of Lando Norris. I'm ahead of both McLarens, which can't be a bad thing in terms of where we're going with points. But it'll certainly be a first lap worth watching. George Russell, Carlos Sainz, Pierre Gasly, Charles Leclerc, Max Verstappen, and then the 2 McLarens around this street circuit. Looking forward to that. Big thanks to Jetcraft, to OEM Exclusive, and of course to Track Ninja. See you tomorrow. What a win for the factory Mercedes team. 1-2 in Las Vegas. Who would have thought? Who would have thought at various stages of this year that Mercedes would be capable of doing that? But capable they were. George Russell winning the Vegas Grand Prix in accomplished style from the pole, effectively leading from start to finish despite early pressure from Ferrari, and then really no pressure other than his teammate Lewis Hamilton in the closing stages of the race. And George had the race sewn up, because whenever he came in, first of all from mediums to hards and then for another set of hards, whenever he did that, he always was doing it with a 6 to 7 lap margin over his opposition. So if there was any pressure going to be applied on him, he was going to be the guy on the newer, fresher tyres. So it worked really, really well for him. And what a night, what a day, what a night, what a win. Lewis Hamilton second for Mercedes, underlying how good that car was this weekend. It sounds a little bit trite saying this weekend. It kind of supposes that maybe next weekend it won't be the same. But bear in mind, Mercedes came to Vegas with no real upgrades at all, just a slight mod to the front wing trailing edge just to get the car balanced with the smaller rear wing settings they're running for Vegas. It's very specific to the circuit. And you got to say Mercedes just did a better job. Maybe they don't know how they did the job of getting the tyres to work. Maybe it was roll center, maybe it was cambers, maybe it was center of pressure, maybe it was all these things combined. But whatever it was, they were always in the window of good tyre management and good temperatures on the Pirellis. We never really saw the hards before the race. Well, we didn't see the hards before the race, but they were very good on those, very good on the mediums, and very good, obviously, in the softs in qualifying as well. And George did put that long run in on softs on Friday too. So they ran the full gamut and they were good on all the compounds, and they always managed to have a pretty good balance for grip, for top speed at any stage of the weekend. As I say, if you said to Mercedes, why and how did you do that? They'd probably say, well, we did all the usual things. We just got the car set up and it went well. For all the other teams, it's getting the tyres to work is sometimes, well, more than sometimes, more often a black art of just try this, try that, and let's see what happens. And if you can't get the tyres to work within about a couple of runs, maybe an hour or two, as Aston Martin couldn't, chances are you're not going to get them to work at any point of the weekend, as we saw, as was the case with Aston, and as we saw with other teams as well. Ferrari did a pretty good job, and in terms of getting the tyres managed is what I'm saying. Carlos Sainz qualified on the front row, as we know, but got blown away off the line in the early laps by Charles Leclerc, his teammate. But it was interesting how quickly the fronts degraded on the Leclerc Ferrari. We're talking half a dozen laps here, and all of a sudden Carlos Sainz is all over him again, and Charles gave position to Carlos, something that Carlos would do later in reverse in the race. But they were no match for the Mercedes in terms of the sheer grip for balance. They did have a top speed advantage at Ferrari, but They couldn't really do anything with it, and George just disappeared. He didn't disappear. He was just methodical and very, very good at how he used the car and used the tyres and eked out a gap over them. So a very good early phase from Mercedes that kind of quietened everybody else down. Ferrari looking strong, but it was pretty clear even at that stage of the race that nobody else was going to get near Mercedes, and that the real story of the race was going to be what Lewis Hamilton could do from his P10 on the grid. That's right. For those who didn't watch qualifying, Lewis Hamilton in this car that George Russell won the Vegas Grand Prix with qualified only 10th. Now, the rider to that, of course, is that he was quickest in Q2, just a few minutes before Q3 started. And had he repeated that Q2 time in Q3, he would have been on the second row at the worst. And had he gone quicker, he probably would have been on the pole, and he probably would have won this race. He drove absolutely beautifully from P10, really good in traffic. He was always quick. His tyres were being punished much more than George's, but he was always there. He was always there in the mirrors of George. You got the feeling that if he got any closer than 5 seconds, that George was going to be able to just go away because his tyres were fresher. But it stayed at about 5 seconds. But that was good enough for Lewis Hamilton to be Lewis Hamilton again. But what happened in Q3? Still don't know. I don't think he knows. I don't think anybody knows about why. It's this black art thing of trying to get the tyres in the right zone, the right manner. That was the only point of the weekend when Mercedes didn't get the tyres to work on either car. And I said yesterday that if you look at where he went out, he was always in traffic. He had Nico Hülkenberg around in front of him most of the time on both runs in Q3, and he had Carlos Sainz in the first run. And he made a couple of mistakes, and he didn't get the tyres right on the out laps because of the traffic. Whereas George, by contrast, was out last when the track was at its quickest, and he was out on a free road as well. Really good positioning, really good use of GPS, maybe good use of strategy, I don't know. And what happened with Lewis will remain, I think, a mystery for a while. Maybe we'll get some deeper story to it. I mean, George was quite emphatic about when he wanted to go out. He wanted to be out late, but I can't imagine Lewis wouldn't have wanted to be out as late as possible as well, because it was a logical thing. But anyway, P10 up to P2. As he was sitting in the car, there's weird Rolls Royces they were driving, a sort of funeral procession after the race over to the podium area. You could see that Lewis was just thinking, I should have won this race. What happened? And, that's his third last race now at Mercedes. It would have been a lovely thing for him to have won at Vegas. And you could see it in his eyes, how much he'd really wanted to win that race and how well he'd driven. And it just never happened for him in that qualifying session. That's where it went away. I suppose you could think also it's probably quite a good thing that did happen, because how would Mercedes have managed George versus Lewis if they'd been on the front row together? Would they have got into the first corner? As I keep saying, it's a good job that the Mercedes hasn't been a front-running car for the last, whatever it is, since 2022, 23, 2.5 years, or 3 years really, because had it been, there would have been horrendous fur flying at Mercedes, that is for sure. There wouldn't have been any sort of management between the two drivers at all from the pit wall, and it would have been pretty chaotic. But as it was a different race. Lewis had nothing but traffic in front of him for most of the race and passed it all. And George had free road and just controlled the race as he wanted to in the best race car of the weekend. Ferrari, it was amazing how quickly the fronts went away. Charles Leclerc got up into P2. It was amazing how quickly the fronts did go away. We didn't see that on the full tank runs on the medium tyres in FP2 or FP3, but it did happen in the race. And maybe it's the way Charles was pushing the car as well. Maybe it was a little bit quicker than the car wanted to go, but they went off very quickly to the point where basically had to let Carlos Sainz pass for Carlos to have a go. Carlos was very good as well. Both drivers were really good at Ferrari, I thought, on the day. But Carlos was delayed very strangely when the Ferrari pit weren't ready for him, and he was just about to come in, and they said, stay out, and he had to go across the white line and back onto the pit straight again. And that's what he did and got away with it. That would have cost him a bit of time. And then there was a bit of a race with Charles and with Lewis, and that obviously, in terms of taking the race to George, detracted from what Carlos was trying to do as well. But a very good P3 in the end. No chance of beating the two Mercedes. The Ferraris were a little bit quicker in a straight line, but it didn't mean much because the grip level was with Mercedes. So Carlos finished third. Charles finished fourth, unbelievably angry on the radio as he crossed the line. Expletives deleted everywhere. Well, the emotion of Charles coming through is not unusual. The words he was using, very unusual for gentleman Charles. I'd be interested to see if he gets a penalty for that. But what was that all about? I think he felt that at one point he'd given position to Carlos and it hadn't really paid off, and maybe should have got the position back in the end or something like that, maybe. But that would have detracted from Carlos's performance. And anyway, Carlos out-qualified him. Carlos deserved that P3 on the podium. He drove really well. So I think if you take a broader, higher view of that, 30,000 foot, maybe 12,000 foot view of that, I think that is more that things aren't going quite the way at Ferrari right now that Charles would like them to go. I mean, it really, with Carlos Sainz, the unloved driver who's being told to leave and is leaving at the end of the year to make way for Lewis Hamilton, really at this stage of the second half of the year, Charles should be dominating at Ferrari, not to the point of a second a lap or anything like that, but he should be the key number one driver. And I think the build-up of Carlos winning Mexico, okay, Brazil was a very good race for Charles, but it was a difficult race for Ferrari in general. They weren't in a position to win it. And then here, Carlos out-qualifying him again, and then obviously getting the podium position. I think it was just a build-up of Charles Leclerc emotion of, this isn't how it's supposed to be. I'm supposed to be kind of showing his boss around here. And I think it was that. He would say not, and I'm sure most of the Ferrari people would not talk about it. But I think if you look at the way racing drivers are and what matters to them, being out qualified by a teammate who's leaving the team is not a good thing at all. That's all I can say. So yeah, Charles, I'm sure will be on best behaviour at the next Grand Prix. And I got to say there, Qatar might be a difficult weekend for Ferrari again. Not their sort of, Vegas, I think more their sort of circuit. And here I should put my hand up and say, in the build-up to Vegas, I thought Ferrari were going to win it. I did mention that there would be a wild card like a Mercedes potentially getting the tyre window right. But I never imagined Mercedes would be this good. So that's an admission, and I have to say, great job by Mercedes all round for that. So Ferrari did look good though. The other key moments of the race, I think, were the quality of the drive of Max Verstappen, where he just basically over-delivered with that car all weekend. It was not a great racing car for Vegas, as Sergio Perez indicated throughout the weekend, but he got the most from it in every dimension at a time when there was no pressure at all, but he just needed to make sure the McLarens were behind him, thank you very much. And he did that perfectly throughout the race. He made it quite difficult for both the Ferrari drivers, made it difficult for Lewis Hamilton to get past, but then he drove really well and cleanly to finish ahead of the McLarens and thus clinch his fourth World Championship, his fourth World Drivers' Championship. It wasn't too long ago that people were saying, wow, Lando Norris has got a real chance here to take the championship to Max Verstappen. And yet, in the blink of an eye, in the blink of Interlagos in the wet, it's all gone. And it's Max Verstappen world champion again. And little talk about Lando Norris. And I was thinking today, and I've gone on about it a lot, the lost points for Lando. But if you assume he should have won the Hungarian Grand Prix, he should have won the Italian Grand Prix, and in my view, he should have won Baku as well, had they not messed up with that call in Q1 when they brought him in, and he got the yellow as a result. He should have won 3 more Grand Prix than he had, and the championship shouldn't be over by now with decent, proper management from the pit wall at McLaren. And all that talk, let's put it into perspective now, all that talk during the Hungarian Grand Prix, into the headset of Lando Norris. Lando, if you want the team behind you for the championship, you know this is the right thing to do. Move over, slow down, give the win to Oscar. And he begrudgingly did that. It wasn't an instant, oh yeah, whatever you say stuff. Lando knew that this was potentially a huge decision that he was about to make. And so he did. And yet what was it all for? What championship? What help was he going to get? I mean, the whole thing was a complete, as I predicted at the time, as I said at the time when I was very wound up after Hungary, the whole thing was a waste of time. Lando should have won the Hungarian Grand Prix and he would have had that Grand Prix to his credit. He should have won Monza. They should have had better control over Oscar's first lap antics at Monza. And as I say, he should have won Baku. Or he had a car quick enough to win Baku. Whether he would have beaten Oscar on the day, who knows? But he certainly would have beaten Charles Leclerc, I think. So, yeah. I think it's been a second half of the year of massively lost opportunity for Lando Norris. And as I say, in the blink of an eye, Max Verstappen has won the World Championship. And now all they're talking about at McLaren is the Constructors' Championship, which of course they've got a very good chance of winning, but it's not quite the same thing, is it? And so that was that. Big celebrations afterwards for Max's fourth, for the two Mercedes drivers, for Carlos to be on the podium. And I think that is one of the themes of the last few races, isn't it? How well Carlos Sainz is now driving at every level, in qualifying, in the race, looking after tyres, in traffic. He's just doing a brilliant job. And he's leaving the team. It's just so sad. It really hurts me to say that, but it is. So congratulations to Mercedes for that win. Congratulations to Max Verstappen on that fourth World Championship. Totally deserved and beautifully secured. It really secured it in the Brazilian Grand Prix, I think. And he did so on a day when somebody who was raised very near him, Thierry Neuville in Belgium nearby, secured the World Rally Drivers' Championship in Japan, effectively when his teammate Ott Tanak, who I mentioned yesterday, easily leading the Rally of Japan, went off in the first stage of Sunday, having got through the really difficult, twisty, slippery bit on a relatively quick right-hander, just misjudged the grip level, went off and destroyed the car and was out of the rally. And unfortunately, the same could be said of Heikki Kovalainen, who you remember won the 2008 Hungarian Grand Prix for McLaren. He replaced Fernando Alonso at McLaren, then went on to Renault. Very talented driver in all sorts of cars. He's had some heart trouble this year. He's had surgeries, recovered from that. Now he's doing a great job in rallying. And he was lying fourth in class in WRC2, going really well, when he lost it at the same corner and his car rolled and ended up right next to Tanak's car. Very lucky there that nobody was hurt, and Heikki and his co-driver were able to walk away from that. And as a result, Honda only had two cars to take into the final double point stage, and Toyota clinched the Constructors' Manufacturers' Championship with three cars for Elfyn Evans, who eventually won the event, Sebastian Ogier and Takamoto Katsuta. But that shouldn't detract from Thierry Neuville's achievement. He's now won his first World Rally Drivers' Championship on the same day that Max Verstappen clinched his fourth World Championship. What is it about that part of the world in Europe? And I wouldn't be going on about Thierry Neuville if I didn't think he was one of the best racing drivers. I'm going to say that because he is a racing driver on the planet Earth. Unbelievable balance and car control and feel, just as Max Verstappen has. So congrats to him. Superb performance. And I'm a bit late putting this video out because young Jack Windsor, age 13, just won a golf tournament today. So we had to stay behind for the trophy prize giving for that. So pretty memorable day, you could say, with those two mega championships and Jack doing his own thing as well. Anyway, there we are. A big thanks to Jetcraft, to OEM Exclusive, and to Track Ninja, and of course to you, the viewers, for watching over these last 3 days. A triple header will be coming right back very soon with the reports from the Qatar Grand Prix, the Qatar Grand Prix, and then of course Abu Dhabi a weekend after that, where I'll be doing that from Monza, where Pirelli will be celebrating with a special event their final month as the tyre supplier for the World Rally Championship. But I'll be doing my reports from Abu Dhabi, from Monza. Should be interesting. Anyway, thanks for watching. Have a great week. See you again soon.